Everything you see is about to disappear. 12,000 years ago, none of this existed. Yet this empty landscape would someday become one of Asia's greatest cities. The first people arrived searching for food. They had no idea they were standing in the future heart of Seoul. For generations, the valley was only a temporary stop. Then, something changed.
Some families stopped moving. They decided to stay. The river provided food. The mountains offered protection. The valley offered opportunity. A village was forming. But villages attract attention. Strangers began arriving. And with them came new ideas. The valley was becoming valuable. And valuable places rarely remain peaceful.
Why build defenses? Because danger was already approaching.
The people here were preparing for a future they could not yet see. What began as a camp had become a town. And soon, towns across the region would compete to control this valley. Power was beginning to concentrate here. The valley had become one of the most important locations in the region. The Age of Kingdoms was approaching. A kingdom had arrived, and it needed a capital.
For the first time, this valley was becoming the center of power. The city was growing rich. The city was growing powerful. And powerful cities always attract enemies. The city had become a prize. And powerful kingdoms were preparing to fight for it. Control of this city meant control of trade, river routes, and power itself. Against all odds, the city survived. And survival would make it stronger. Peace had returned. But history was only getting started.
The river was turning the city into a crossroads of wealth and influence.
Every generation left behind a larger city than the one before. A new dynasty was rising. And with it came new ambitions.
The city was becoming impossible to ignore. Seoul was becoming one of the most important cities on the peninsula.
Then news arrived of an unstoppable force moving across Asia.
The Mongols were coming. And everywhere they went, cities disappeared.
But once again, Seoul survived.
A decision was approaching that would change the city's destiny forever. A new dynasty had seized power.
Then came the decision that changed everything. Seoul was chosen as the capital of Joseon.
Kings would rule from here for centuries. Seoul had become the heart of a kingdom. It seemed as though nothing could threaten the city now.
They were wrong. An invasion was coming that would shake Seoul to its foundations.
The Japanese invasion had begun. Thousands fled as enemy armies advanced toward the capital. Then the unimaginable happened. The king abandoned Seoul. For the first time in generations, Seoul had fallen. But the occupation would not last. The city was wounded, but not defeated.
Once again, Seoul rebuilt itself.
The city emerged stronger than anyone expected. A century after invasion, the scars had nearly disappeared.
Seoul had become the unquestioned center of Korea. The city's population grew exponentially, filling the basin with dense districts and bustling roads, showcasing visible prosperity.
Then, a new challenge arrived. Not an army, but a changing world.
The old Seoul was fading, and the 20th century was about to transform the city forever. A new power was tightening its grip on Korea, and Seoul stood directly in its path.
In 1910, Korea was annexed by Japan. Seoul entered one of the most controversial chapters in its history.
The city modernized quickly, but many Koreans saw these changes as symbols of occupation.
Then the city erupted. The March 1st movement demanded independence. Despite unrest, the city continued growing into a modern urban center. Millions now lived and worked in the shadow of occupation.
After World War II ended, Japanese rule collapsed. Koreans poured into the streets to celebrate. Seoul became the capital of a new nation. But peace would not last. Then came the Korean War.
Within days, the city became a battlefield. The war devastated Seoul. The city changed hands multiple times. Many wondered whether the capital would ever recover.
The recovery started slowly, but it would soon become one of history's greatest urban transformations.
The city was growing faster than anyone expected.
Millions moved to Seoul, searching for opportunity.
The Han River was becoming the center of an economic miracle. The city that war had destroyed was now growing at astonishing speed. Seoul was becoming one of Asia's most important cities. Then the world arrived. Seoul stepped onto the global stage during the 1988 Olympics. The Olympics were over, but Seoul's transformation was just beginning. Investment poured into the city as South Korea's economy surged. Millions were now living in a city that seemed to grow larger every year. But Seoul refused to stop. The recovery came faster than many expected.
A new century had begun. And Seoul was preparing for a technological revolution.
The city was becoming one of the most connected urban centers on Earth. The skyline was changing almost faster than residents could recognize.
What was once a river valley had become a global technology powerhouse.
Suddenly, the entire world was talking about a district called Gangnam.
Seoul was no longer just a capital city. It had become a global megacity.
Few places on Earth were evolving as quickly as Seoul.
The world's attention returned once again to Korea. Then, an unexpected global event changed life in cities everywhere.
Even during difficult times, Seoul continued moving forward.
The city quickly regained its momentum.
From hunters beside a river to one of the most advanced cities on Earth. Empires rose, kingdoms fell, wars destroyed the city again and again, but Seoul survived them all.
Long before skyscrapers touched the sky, hunters crossed these valleys searching for survival. The first settlers could never have imagined what their small community would become.
The mountains remained. The river remained. Everything else changed.
For centuries, this city was the seat of kings and the heart of a kingdom.
After the Korean War, many believed the city would never recover. The mountains remained. The river remained. Everything else changed. 12,000 years of struggle, ambition, war, and innovation created the city you see today.
From a lonely river valley to a global megacity, this was the evolution of Seoul. What city should we travel through time next?